Hello foam warriors, I'm DrFlux, and in today's video we're looking at the Nerf Tommy gun. This is a mod or an integration between the new Nerf Fortnite DG and the Buzby Power Mech, creating one awesome drum gun or Tommy gun. So let's jump right into this review and keep the change, you filthy animal. So in this video, we're gonna go ahead and go through the whole process of how I built this Tommy gun. Now, this thing took about 3 days for me to build, and some quick things about it. This is all stock internals. I haven't switched out the motors or the flywheels yet. This is on a 2S LiPo, so performance is not, crazy, but it is okay for what it is. So this mod was mainly more of a cosmetic build for me, and I was essentially trying to test proof of concept. So can I actually put all this stuff together and make this to look like a Tommy gun? And I think it's pretty good. Obviously, a real Tommy gun is very thin, has a thin profile. This is very chunky, which is fine. I mean, this is a toy, and it has some very kind of outlandish, exaggerated parts to it, which kind of goes with its toy aesthetic. So that's fine, I'm fine with that. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. I did end up purchasing a Power Mech, so let's go ahead and unbox that. All right, now that we have that out of the box, let's go ahead and crack it open. Note, I'm just gonna do a full takedown. So if you need to see how the internals of a Power Mech looks, now's your chance. Next up, we go ahead and open up the DG. Now the DG is a Springer, and if you've seen my video, you can see that I had the misfortune of having mine break pretty quickly actually. And I actually opened this thing up and found the culprit. It was a little peg that helps the rotation mech function. So that thing sheared off and I no longer could rotate my drum upon priming. Now I could have easily fixed this, but it kind of made me think, you know what? I really wish this thing was full auto, for one. And secondly, I wish it had higher capacity. So that got me thinking. Buzby had some pretty cool Tommy, the Tommy 20 or just the old school drum guns. And then I realized, hey, I had a Power Mech, was essentially the newest, latest, and greatest of those old cool looking Tommy gun blasters. So I figured let's go ahead and bring this thing back to life. So next up, we're gonna see where we're gonna make our cuts. Now on the DG, it was pretty easy because we're just cutting out this front area. So I mark these and then take it to the bandsaw and do some cuts. I also do a demonstration of how the Power Mech drive assembly works. And this is a pretty cool system because what it's doing is it actually ratchets the drum and engages the pusher all in one kind of clockwork motion. So that's a really cool mechanism that it has inside this thing. I ended up, after testing the functionality of it, I went and did some cuts on the Power Mech. After getting both blasters cut to where I needed them, I then decided that I was actually going to take out the material right here on the DG, so I marked those cuts and cut those out as well. In this stage, there's just a lot more form fitting and basically making sure the parts fit perfectly. So there's a lot of kind of back and forth and trimming and cutting and filing, and this probably took the longest out of everything, just to kind of make sure everything fits properly. Okay, so I felt this would be a good place to stop and kind of talk about the build. Now, as you can see, I've painted some of the parts. Some of the parts that are kind of finished, I just went ahead and painted them. This I used a wash on, and then I went back over it with a matte varnish, just kind of coated it just to kind of lock in that textured wash kind of look. So on the front up here, we did have a little mounting area, so I made kind of a custom piece. What this is I pulled it off, flattened it off, and then used putty to kind of build up the sides so that we have a nice flat area to mount the forward grip to. So I will be attaching this probably with like an epoxy or something. Maybe do some kind of mechanical binding in there, maybe some screws or whatnot. But the idea was to have this as two separate pieces, which this does come apart. I still have to drill out where the screw points are. So that will mount up here. On the back, we have our battery tray. It's going to be back here. And I found a project box lid that I had cut up in the past. You can use any kind of flat piece, but this works nice because it actually has lips on the side that kind of hold it in. And these I actually got from a computer case. These are thumb screws for a computer case, and they actually worked really well with these brass inserts. Now, a little trick is, if you don't have enough material for the brass insert, you can actually just use putty and kind of build it up so it has something to grab onto. So these actually work really well to kind of lock these in place. And yeah, pretty happy with that. So the battery compartment will pretty much take up this back space. Up here is going to be this gear assemblies up here, so this whole compartment's already used. I might have to create some type of wall just to make sure the battery doesn't kind of tangle up into this area, because there's a lot of mechanics that are going on here. We can also talk about this right here is just some plexiglass. I put it over there, kind of drew it, and then took it over to the bandsaw and just kind of made the cuts, and then used putty on the edges. I'm going to be sanding this a little bit more, kind of smoothing it all out, but that's kind of the look I was going for. The mechanism up here that actually breaks this up and down, I've just put putty in there, and I'm actually going to lock all this. This one I've already put a rivet in. There's a rivet right here just to hold that piece together. I also used rivets on the main body, or the main part under the drum, just to hold these all together, in addition to the putty work. So as we can see, the battery tray just sits on there. Let me screw these in just to keep it together. So this switch, of course, is just going to be for looks. All this painted up, maybe like a metal or something. Back here we have, of course, our hand grip. We'll go there. This whole thing's going to be, I'm going to paint it metal with some black trim throughout it. And then of these little pieces will be this kind of this copper type of metallic color. I had to make a custom insert for this part because there is a hole here for this to slide for the DG. We're not doing any pump action sliding, so I just converted that into a filler. And I'll probably end up just attaching this to one side, so when you take it apart, it'll just be attached to one of the sides. Now for the tricky part. The tricky part was the barrel. I had a lot of fitting issues with the barrel, so I decided to go with just a larger barrel. So I found I had an old Centurion barrel, so I took that apart. And then I also found this PVC pipe. I think this is 1.5 inch, maybe 2 inch, but it works as a perfect coupler. And then this piece is from the Centurion. That's the mounting piece. And then this basically is a guide to help me identify exactly where the barrel is going to be. So as we can see here, once that's in there, we can kind of put the guide, actually this is going to be this way, put the guide there, and this tubing is actually going to be flush. And then right on the other side of it, we're going to sandwich this piece, which I actually had to trim all that out inside there because it didn't fit this. But now that it's trimmed, it's going to act to kind of sandwich this onto the blaster. And of course we'll do the flat side down. So it'll be like that. And we just have to, currently I'm just working on mounting this. I'm probably going to do a similar method that I did in the back with the brass inserts. I'm probably going to build up some material and actually put 2 points to mount this barrel. My next step, continue sanding these two pieces more, and then I'm going to actually paint these. I will be popping out all these trim type things, and what I'm going to be doing is probably just drilling them out since they're solvent welding, and I hope that they can just pop out. All these little trims are going to be black, and then the entire thing is just going to be silver. Keep in mind, this paint right here, because I am going to be using vinyl dye where I can, this stuff is a pain to vinyl dye on, so I'm going to have to sand all this off. And one last thing, I am just going to use the original flywheels for this build for now. In the future, I'm looking to possibly do an upgrade on it, but just for this current build, I'm just going to use the stock stuff. It was actually, I tested it on 2S and it performed just fine. Same with the pusher mechanism, I put this on 2S and it was fine. After getting all my parts painted and everything, it was time for reassembly. One important part of the assembly was I had to actually make my own screw points. I did this by using the brass heat insert into an existing piece of scrap from just my blaster drawer. I just have a big bin filled with parts from old blasters, and I found some posts. So I actually just sunk these in, and then I used some putty at the base of the screw point to kind of lock it all together, because I didn't know exactly what the height was going to be, but I knew roughly where it would be. So the putty just kind of helped bridge that gap. We then have to run some wires, and I ended up just drilling some holes and kind of feeding the wires through, because I wanted to ensure that these wires didn't get tangled up in the automated rapid fire mechanism. Essentially, you really just don't want any debris or wires or anything to kind of fall into that mechanism, because it will create probably catastrophic failure. You know, if something gets caught into those mechanical arms, it will probably seize it up or break things, and it's bad news. So I made sure to try to hide all those wires. Now, when we soldered this up, it was essentially just your standard, kind of like a Nemesis or a Prometheus, or something that has like a conveyor belt. That's the wiring guide I followed. And I'll leave a link to Captain Xavier's wiring guide, because that's a pretty good explanation as to what's going on in this blaster. So link in the description. And here we're just showing how we used a 2-stage trigger. On a partial pull, we start revving. So revving starts, and then on a full pull, we actually fire. And I mistakenly actually wired this as normally open. I don't know if you can see in the footage, but keep a note, it's not exactly the same wiring diagram as what you'd see in Captain Xavier's video. The difference is on the rev portion, instead of normally open, it's going to be normally closed because the switch is closed. And after some more testing and just making sure that everything fits just right, we buttoned this thing up. Now I went and just did some basic tests, just some quick, just to make sure things are working, and I did some chronograph. The chronograph numbers are pretty standard. They're just, they're something you would see in a stock Power Mech, so nothing too crazy. But this thing would be great for kind of like a lower FPS battle. I think I was hitting around 70s. So in the future, when I revisit this, I'm definitely going to be doing some motor upgrades. I'm going to be looking at some of the cage geometries. I was able to find an old cage design for the Buzzbee Tommy 20, I believe, and it simply didn't fit. So I think the file is very close. It's just these sides were a little bit too thick, and I could modify the actual area that you slide this into and probably make this fit. So this would be your standard motor mounts, and then I could throw, you know, some basic flywheels in here and whatnot. So definitely could get some higher crush options up here, some higher FPS, you know, just some higher motors, and maybe even go to 3S. This back mechanical, this mechanism in here, I might have to do like a MOSFET if I'm gonna be going on to a 3S. But as of right now, works fine on 2S. I just wanted to make sure this thing could actually function, and then we'll go from here. This is a good place to start to up its performance. Also, just did some target shooting from 30 feet, and it's not the most accurate blaster at this point, but you know, as a spray and pray option, it's fine. And for the most part, it's relatively accurate. Well, I'm DrFlux, and this pretty much wraps up this build guide, or this mod guide to my Tommy gun. Let me know in the comment section if you think this is a cool build. Is this something you would like to try? I'd like to hear if other people are interested in building something like this. I want to thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, happy foam flinging.